I've only got myself the JBL Boombox 3, and I'm super excited. I bet you're super excited. The thing about JBL is, if you're going to buy them, you're going to have lots of dollars. You're going to have loads of money, because JBL, as we know, a lot of big brands charge you just for the name. But it's not just for the name. When you get the name, behind it, there will be, believe it or not, research and development and a big marketing company. They all got to be paid for, and we pay for it when we buy their speakers. But we're getting some decent cheap brands now. The likes of Tribbett, Soundcore, I've got to say Mifa. There are other brands, I'm not going to name them, but they're my favourite of the cheap brands. Proved you can do it for less money. But hey ho, there's going to be things you're going to be missing, like development of the app. No app with the Mifa. We're just getting the app with Tribbett. But we do have a really nice app that's well developed now with Soundcore. And when I talk about apps, of course, JBL, yeah, they've got an app, but they've got a 3-band graphic equalizer. You will get a 3-band graphic equalizer in the JBL Boombox 3. Ow! You keep going on and on about the JBL Boombox 3, and you've got 2 speakers on the table. Do you know why? I'm going to compare it. I didn't realise how rattly my table was beforehand. Maybe this wasn't a good idea. But I'm going to compare it with the JBL Boombox 2. Why? Because doesn't that seem sensible?
Yes.
It seemed sensible to me at the time for the very first video. It's all about, have we had a massive forward improvement? Now, the first thing you'll notice is, oh, they only got a little logo. They didn't put much research and development into the logo. But do you know what they did? They put the money into the research, and we came up with the huge, massive, and there's still room for improvement. Can you see how much empty space? One day it was a JBL Marketing Kings. And when you move it to the side, it kind of glows red. Not as much as on some of the others, but it definitely cleverly increases in red, and everybody gets super excited. So we've got the JBL Boombox 3. What are the differences? Well, it does kind of look the same at first glance. You've got your multifunction button, volume up, your Bluetooth light, you've got your power light, you've got your volume down, and of course your link. Hallelujah. There was a time when we went Connect Plus, Party Boost, and none of them were backwards compatible. Now they're sticking with Party Boost. I believe both of these, well, don't you check before you sat down? Well, I already knew it, actually, and I just checked, just to make sure absolutely got it right. They're both Party Boost, they're compatible, you can connect them both together, but it's going to be party mode, of course. These speakers will do 100 plus speakers in party mode, or 2. You've got 6 million speakers, or if you want stereo, 2. A lot of us want stereo. You wouldn't believe it, but hey, we should be happy. JBL have given us an upgrade, and it's still a stereo speaker, kind of. Now, here's the thing. What's the big improvement in the JBL Boombox 3? It's a 3-way design. When is a 3-way? Not a good idea. We won't go there, but hey-ho. What does that mean? Well, it's a really interesting design. We've got a big, what they're calling subwoofer. And it's a very, 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 very fast racetrack driver in the middle. And then we've got woofers on the side, and we've got tweeters on the side. Yeah, did you spot that? We've got woofers and tweeters. So the tweeter is mounted upon the woofer. And you're probably thinking, oh my God, diffraction. It's going to go and have its biggest party ever. Well, no, actually, as it doesn't sound intuitive, but there isn't anything wrong if it's properly implemented in putting a tweeter on top of a woofer. I'm not a DIYer, a DIY guy with speakers. I'm not going to go into the maths of it, but as long as you get the maths right and the spacing right, you can place a tweeter. In fact, going back into the 80s, even in my own era, you did get speakers that were designed that way. Don't get confused. They are not coaxial. Coaxial speakers, drivers, well, transducers apparently we've got to call everything now. I come from an era where it was all drivers. However, the coaxial has the tweeter integrated into the actual woofer itself. This is actually mounted, so it's part of the frame, and it's about getting the distancing right. The big downside, you would probably think, is in diffraction. As I said, obviously you have an obstruction. There are sound waves. You hit an obstruction, the sound waves now divert into even more sound waves, and then you start getting those phase cancellation. What's phase cancellation? It's timing errors. So you've now got separated waves, the same sound, but is now hitting you at different times to your ear. Not only that, where they actually merge, you get peaks and dips. It's a nightmare, but you'd think that was the issue, but the actual issue is really getting the phase right by when you going on and off axis. I'm not going to get into it. I'm not going to. I admit I'm not a DIY guy. It's not saying I've been into, but it isn't. It isn't the weird thing that intuitively you might think. But I won't get into that now. The point being, they're calling it 3 when they're calling this thing, this racetrack driver in the middle, a subwoofer. So that should mean, and obviously in your head they're hoping that means 50 hertz and below, all handled by that driver. Of course, we've got passive radiators both sides. As I hope you know, passive radiators are the alternative to a port, and they work on the they are out of phase with the woofers, because as the woofers go in, the passive radiators come out. They're tuned to specific frequencies, but it still will mirror those frequencies when the woofer is coming back inwards in terms of its excursion. So we're thinking massive improvement. They're calling it a subwoofer. You'd hope it was a subwoofer, and you'd hope that it wasn't marketing. So you'd think on the old-fashioned Boombox 2, with traditional woofer, tweeter. No subwoofer, but we've got passive radiators. So now we've got an extra driver. So in terms of just adding that extra driver, according to my mathematics, I'm not a DIY and I may be wrong, but I worked that out as a huge leap in surface area. So from 298 millimeters squared to 27,484 millimeters squared. Why does surface area matter? Well, if nothing changed but surface area, they would go louder. It's going to push more air. But are they they look the same size passive radiators. If they're pushing more air, well, I guess it's down to the tuning of the passive radiators. But this is the reason. I mean, we got super excited, of course. They instead of just saying, oh, and we've released a new speaker, they will tell you months ahead, we're releasing a new speaker. By the way, here's all the clever things on paper. You're going to make it sound as though it's absolutely brilliant. And so too many times we are disappointed when we actually get the speaker. I've got to point out, this is the ND version. I'm pointing that out because JBL, in their wisdom, keep putting out the same model speaker as in this is a JBL Boombox 3. But they have different versions when they actually have different parts and they actually sound different. It's diabolical. Quite honestly, that if you're not in the know, you wouldn't even know that. And so I'm reviewing the Boombox 3. It's the ND version. And if you get a different version, what they're going to call it now, the TL or I don't know, the ZZ, let's just say, could sound, not say completely different. The overall sound signature will be the same. But if you've got an ear for it, you will hear differences within that signature sound. We were talking about the differences. You notice the handle. I actually prefer the integrated one on the Boombox 2, but I guess from their point of view, this is a clever idea. I don't know. Is it cheaper to add? In fact, they even have part of this in the marketing. What do they say? I'm going to tell you right now. Something about a handle. I wish I'd get my life organised. Honestly, my life is as disorganised as it appears to be now. So they're saying, featuring. This is a major feature. A sturdy metal handle. Although it feels plastic, with silicone grips. So we got grips below, but you know, it's not here or there. But to the marketing department, they get super excited with things like that. Got twin side caps. I don't know what they mean by twin side caps. Do they mean the passive radiators or the surround there? Again, I think we should get some of these marketing people to come and explain why they write this nonsense. So it is IPX67. I want to do the overall specs at the end of the video because this preamble, I don't know, it's probably going to be 20 minutes by the time I get the first clip. And then someone says, hey, talk. I apologise. This is just the way I do it, my disorganised life. I try to tell you what I think are the major things you should know because you're coming to this, well, on today, it's a big deal. Obviously, what's the price? We want another price. I'm noticing in the UK, we're getting deals now on the Boombox 2, as though we didn't know it was overpriced. It used to be 450 quid, they're now asking 300 quid, but still seem to be asking $500. 450 quid, $500. That is a lot of dollars. When we've got the lights of the Trivet Soundbox Blast and even even JBL have their Encore Essential and all that, but I see they're going silly with the batteries. And that's the other thing actually I wanted to mention. I think I'm gonna try and leave the rambling to the end now. I don't know how much I've rambled now, but we'll see. But the last thing I'll say before we actually get into the nitty-gritty, and I wish I could remember what I was talking about, was indeed talking about the battery. And here's the thing. The old battery on the Boombox 3, on the Boombox 2, was indeed 72.6 watt hours. I only do watt hours on my channel because anything else is meaningless unless they give you the volts. This is the easiest way to compare. 72.6, nice size battery, isn't it? They're trying to market the Boombox 3 as though it's got the same battery. It hasn't. So they're telling you it's 72.6 watt hours. That's what the marketing department will tell you because they knock off at 5 and they didn't want to read any more. If you actually look at what it says on the speaker itself, if you actually look inside the manual, and it will tell you that it's a 69.6. I don't know if they're having a laugh and they're going 69, 69, but however, and if after my own heart if they are, but however, it is 69.69 watt hour, let's say 70 watt hours versus 73 watt. It's not the same battery, it's a smaller battery. That's JBL, that's what they do. I can only give you the facts. I'm going to show you my frequency response measurements where we're hoping the bass goes to 120 decibels and the world shaking as we play the speaker. Hopefully you'll notice immediately the major issues going on here. Big peak 700 hertz, preceded by big dip 350 hertz. And although it's within a 10 dB range, and that's not massively unusual, say for a budget speaker, it is lower down the frequency. You will notice peaks and dips more as you go down in frequency. And how this translates into real world listening, we will find out. If you compare that to JBL Boombox 2, well, that's looking nice and flat and smooth. Yes, big bass peak. Yes, a kind of one note bass peak as we are used to with JBL. But in terms of how flat they are, there's only one winner there. In terms of, well, we've got a subwoofer. Have we got deeper bass? It does appear to be a tad more in this deeper bass, 50 hertz and below. But actually, it looks like we've got a bit more of a bass peak on the Boombox 2. How will that translate into the real world? We will find out. If we overlay them, make it easier to see the differences. Well, yes, tad more in the deep bass. But the only thing you're really going to notice here is 700 hertz peak, maximum volume. Yes, it looks like the Boombox 3 will go a bit louder, but it will go a lot louder simply because of that peak. It is a little bit louder, up to around 5 to 6 kilohertz. So what's happening with this 700 hertz peak? If we have a look at measurements for that so-called subwoofer and the woofer. The so-called subwoofer, as we can see, is really rolling off from 50 hertz anyway, where we would expect the subwoofer to be really digging deeper than that. And yes, it's rolling off from about 200 hertz, but it appears to play all the way up to a kilohertz. It does appear that the small woofer, or the pair of woofers, this is a single woofer being measured, is kicking in around 700 hertz. But this is the crossover region. It looks like there's a big problem in that crossover between the so-called subwoofer and woofers. So subwoofer is still playing at the point the woofer is kicking in. Obviously, it's a crossover. We'd expect that, a roll-off and then a rise for the woofer. But as it kicks in, it then dips down and then kicks in again 3 kilohertz. And then that combination woofer, I should say, it is a combination woofer and tweeter, looks reasonably flat after that. So this is poor, but how it translates into real-world listening can be quite different from how it looks in a measurement. Come on, JBL. It's not a subwoofer. So we'd expect the subwoofer to be playing down, we'd hope, to, 20 to 50 hertz. But let's be reasonable to cover the upper bass up to, say, up to 300 hertz. It seems to play high. So it's actually, and it seems to be already rolling off, say, 45 hertz and down. 45 hertz for these speakers, let's face it, it's decent, but it's not a subwoofer. It's rolling off. So we're saying 45 hertz, and it's still playing, albeit now rolling off because of the crossover, at 1 kilohertz. That's a woofer, okay? So let's move on. It ain't a subwoofer. Let's have a listen. What I'm calling low volumes for these Boombox speakers, about 40%. So about 40% on the Boombox 3 is actually 45% on the JBL Boombox 2.
To the moon and back, that's where I've been. I need something new, so I want you to take me to another place where I've never been before. Are you using all this space? Yeah, all I wanna say is I want you to take me to another place, to another place, to another. I want you to another place, to another place, to another. I want you to take me. Now we spend our time doing 69. Then you need relief again, 'cause I got in your head, and I'm like a drug. You won't get enough, you know that's just the way I feel. 'Cause everything I've seen before won't have anymore. Won't give me any satisfaction. To the moon and back, that's where I've been. I need something new, so I want you to take me to another place where I've never been before. Are you using all this space? Yeah, all I wanna say is I want you to take me to another place, to another place, to another. I want you to take me to another place, to another place, to another. I want you to, 'cause everything I've seen before won't have anymore. Won't give me any satisfaction. To the moon and back, that's where I've been. I need something new, so I want you to.
So very little in it at these volumes, but what you're really going to hear is a difference in that peak where the subwoofer and woofers start crossing, or indeed whether a woofer actually kicks in. And I have to say, at lower volumes, it does help to give forward vocals, and it helps to give a bit more clarity. So not a major issue in terms of real-world listening at these lower volumes. To all intents and purposes, the bass is actually about the same. Technically, there's a tad more bass on the Boombox 2 in these lower volume measurements, but the Boombox 3 is playing 40% volume where the loudnesses are matched. It sounds pretty nice at low volumes, but here's the issue when you're, for me, trying to do a fair test. So when you're normalizing, I'm trying to do what you do with your ears, and you play them at the same volume. Because of that big, narrow 700 hertz peak and the dips at either side, if I actually normalize them to what sounds like the same volume, exactly the same volume, you're going to get less. It's going to sound as though there's less bass on the Boombox 3 because it's overpowering the rest of the frequency response out of proportion to how narrow that little bit is, and so you won't get the actual you won't get the impact of the bass in the real world. So I've actually normalized it to everything except that mids peak, because that is what stands out, and that's the only way to show the difference in bass. And actually, about the same. It ain't a subwoofer, is it? It's not a subwoofer, and actually, it's the Boombox 2 that just about has a tad more bass. But obviously, it's going to be how you level those volumes. That's complicated what I do in this review because of how narrow, but how that narrow peak makes it sound louder to your ears. And if I actually normalize them in the true sense, it wouldn't be a fair test. This would have less bass. And that's the same in a lot of speaker tests, is where do you normalize to? Anyway, get on with it. The point, so no major advances. Ain't a subwoofer, it's a big woofer. But you know what? It actually sounds nice. It does work at low volumes. What it does, it gives you forward vocals. I do like what it does with the vocals at these volumes. Pushes them forward. It's nice and clear. Makes that Boombox 2 sound a bit dull. At low volumes, it works. We're going to have to see what happens it's a boombox. You're going to play it loud, around 70%, but 70% on the Boombox 3 is 75% on the Boombox 2.
This love is ill. I wish that it was different. Don't know what it is that made us so indifferent. We're drifting in the dark. Can we do better? Wish I could rewind back to the start. Can we do better than this? Better. Wish I could rewind back to the start. Can we do better than this? Better. We're drifting in the dark. Can we do better? Wish I could rewind back to the start. Can we do better than this? Better.
So we're pushing the volumes. The Boombox 3 comes a tad more into its own in terms of, well, we've got a subwoofer and do we have more bass? Well, yes, now we do have a bit more bass, but we also have that big peak where it seems to be more of an issue now. It's a bit screechy now, that peak. But yes, we do have a bit more bass, and at 40 hertz into the deep bass, proper deep bass territory, well, it's actually rolled off, but it's 3 decibels more. Before it rolls off, overall deep bass, around a decibel and a half advantage to the Boombox 3. And there is the issue. Well, you may think that sounds absolutely fantastic. In my opinion, that is a harsh listen now at 70%. At those volumes, I much prefer the Boombox 2. You may think it actually sounds, well, don't forget, it depends what you're listening back on. Obviously, I'm hoping you're listening back on something that's actually a bit flat. Because, for instance, if you had on your speakers, in your head, whatever you're listening back on, supposing you have a dip there at 700 hertz, that's going to sound absolutely spot on and fantastic, and you won't understand. So a lot of this relies on you know, having some understanding and listening back on something that's reasonably flat. But there, if you are in the real world, I can tell you, for my ears, that's the problem. That makes it now sound that push in the narrow part at 700 hertz, and because it's actually low down, the lower down the frequency you go, the more you're going to notice peaks and dips. Your ears, your brain and your mind does this, what they call smoothing. So things merge into each other, and where you've had issues, you may not hear them because it's getting a bit smudged, it's a bit blurry in terms of how you hear it. The lower down the frequencies you go, the more aware you're going to be, the less smoothing your ears do, your brain does, and the more you will notice these things. 700 hertz is quite low. You're going to notice that. For me, even though mid upper bass is actually there, the nature of that peak is smothering them. It's dominating. It's making it sound as though the upper bass is missing. It ain't. It's there, but it sounds. It's now sound. The nature of this speaker now sounds hollow. It's a hard listen for my ears. And if you are I'm very old, but at least my ears still work. Although a lot of people say they don't work. But anyway, my ears do work. Do you know why? I've had them tested. But however, for a lot of people, if your hearing is going, that's going to sound fantastic to your ears. Although it's not a high frequency, where it is crucial. And it will sound like, because with vocals especially, I would say, it's going to make it stand out and come forward. But now it's harsh, and the nature of it makes everything else sound a bit hollow. Sounds scooped out in the mids and on the mid bass and the upper bass. It isn't. It's actually there, but it sounds as though it is because of that. So for me, unlistenable now. 70% volume. Really, really nice. Really, really like it. Well, now it's 300 quid. Now it's a proper contender, isn't it? Before it was well overpriced. Who would have thought that, JBL? Everybody. Now, I did go on comments and I did see Mr. He says he's not a JBL fanboy, but he calls himself JBL Booster 300 or something like that. Telling me, claiming that, oh, you got the wrong version, get a different version speaker. I don't know what the other versions. So here's the thing. This is on my ND version. That issue may not even be on other speakers. And this review may not even be relevant to you. That's the problem with JBL. And if you are a JBL fanboy, fair enough. I've got nothing against fanboys. I'd like to get some more. I've got a few, I think. They're telling me now. And that's great. It keeps me going, quite honestly. However, it's diabolical what JBL do. We should call them out. People need to know, if they see a review on a speaker, let's get this right. All these speakers have a variance. The more, as you go up to the high end, tolerances become narrower. Even at high end, you have a problem with tolerances. What does that mean? It means one speaker can sound different to another. That's going to happen. And the cheaper speakers are going to have lower tolerances because of the money. There's, it's budget. There's the money involved. The margins aren't there. So it's not about the fact that there are differences between two. The point is, the differences are huge. They actually use different parts, and that's why we should be calling JBL out. For my opinion, if I had to buy either one of these speakers and they were the same price, and I was listening at those volumes, and do you know what? They are the volumes I listen at. It's the Boombox 2. But we're going to maximum volume. We'll see what the headroom is. We'll see what the real differences between these speakers are. 100% volume, but here's the thing. What's the thing now? I'm going to tell you now. If you stick the mains lead in, they go louder. So this is on battery, 100%.
Tell me, do you feel like I do? Wish that things were different and time didn't go slipping. Oh, tell me, do you feel the same like I do? Feel like I do. Feel like I do. You think about it, you feel the same. Looking back, they're in the sand. Those were the best times that we ever had. Memories on replay from all of those days. Do you think about them? Oh, tell me, do you feel like I do? Wish that things were different and time didn't go slipping. Oh, tell me, do you feel the same like I do? Slipping. Oh, tell me, do you feel the same like I do? Feel like I do. Feel like I do. You think about it, you feel the same. Tell me, do you feel like I do? Wish that things were different.
Maximum volume. The Boombox 3 does go louder, but it is screechier. We still have that 700 hertz peak, but it is louder everywhere. But in terms of the bass, the difference isn't massive really. Overall, about a decibel up in total bass and a couple of decibels up in terms of the deep bass, which is not insignificant, but an overall bass, a decibel is not going to be hugely noticeable. Certainly not with that 700 hertz peak, but you do get the volume. Wow, it's a massive improvement in how loud it goes, and that's what it's all about. It's a boombox, but hang on a second. It's not what it's all about. Yes, we do have a bit more bass. What have we got? About a decibel more. That's not insignificant, but only really shows at maximum volume. But here's the problem, a decibel more overall bass. Do you know that's more it's got in the mids? 4 decibels, and that's a problem. The overall sound signature has changed, although they've done, brilliant, we've got a decibel more bass, good, but 4 decibels in the mids means it's the mids that are dominating. You're not going to really get a sense of that bass. It's now piercing. It's unlistenable at 70%. For me, in my opinion, on this speaker, obviously still listen. If it's just about volume, it goes louder, well done. You're out the room, that's all you need to know, goodbye. The problem now, it's so piercing, the 700 hertz is dominating, even though it's got more bass. We can't give it credit because it sounds, to me, personally, awful. More surface area, according to my mathematics. Considerably more surface area, going a bit louder. Now, they claim, well, they do this silly, JBL, shut down your marketing department, please. They're doing this silly thing where they're inviting you to add up their specs. We used to just get the headline spec, this is what the amp's doing. We don't even know what they're measuring anymore. But however, they would like you to think 80 watts RMS. So RMS is really what it's doing. It's not, we don't want to know peak, we want to know RMS. That's the actual power. They're saying the power of the subwoofer, but we don't know. Is that what the subwoofer's rated at, or is that what the amp is putting out? We don't know into what load stuff. We're not. My point being, all these things are normally standardized, but they're not giving you any idea of what they're measuring or how they're measuring. That means it's meaningless, guys. I'm telling you it's meaningless, but they're asking you to add up. So 80 watts RMS subwoofer, 2 times 40 watts RMS on the mids. So that's another 80, 160. Plus, they're saying plus 2 times 10 watts tweeters. So 20 plus the 80, 100 plus, so they're saying to you, you got 180 watts. On the Boombox 2, they used to tell you, AC by the way, 80 watts they said, 180 watts is what, and I guarantee they're saying in the playground, look at my bandbar Fred's 180 watts. Oh, you only got a Boombox 280 watts. But the point is, that doesn't, the maths don't work, does it? 80 watts, but that's about as loud as, that's, to me, with a given surface area, that must have the same power as the Boombox 2. Because it's going to go louder anyway because of the surface area. So it's all bleep, 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 bollocks, isn't it? It's really getting ridiculous. So that was with the, on battery. We know it goes louder on mains. How much louder does it go out? Oh, I'm going to show you.
Feel the same like I do. Feel like I do. Feel like I do. You think about it, you feel the same. Looking back, they're in the sand. Those were the best times that we ever had. Memories on replay from all of those days. Do you think about them? Oh, tell me, do you? Oh, feel like I do. Oh, wish that things were different and time didn't go slipping. Oh, tell me, do you feel the same like I do? Feel like I do. Oh, wish that things were different. Time didn't go slipping. Oh, tell me, do you feel the same like I do? Feel like I do. Feel like I do. You think.
So yes, you stick the mains lead in. It does go louder. It goes louder by a couple of decibels. About a decibel louder in terms of the actual peaks. You're gaining about a decibel in overall bass. In fact, overall everywhere, it goes about a decibel louder. Whether this is a measurement error or not, the high end, it's hard to tell, but it appears there's a bit more of a roll off with the mains lead in. But in terms of loudness, it goes louder. And by the way, it makes about the same difference overall as sticking the mains lead into the Boombox 2, which went about a decibel louder, but you got a bit more extension with the mains lead now on the Boombox 3, whereas it didn't translate quite as much into the bass on the Boombox 2. I have to say, it makes a bit more difference sticking the mains lead in on the Boombox 3 than it did on the Boombox 2, but not massively. And it's not a massive difference, really. It goes a bit louder. Yeah, it does go a bit louder. It goes a bit more loud on the Boombox 3 than it did on the Boombox 2. We've got a decibel more overall in terms of the LUFS on the Boombox 2, whereas we're getting 2.2 LUFS increase on the Boombox 3, but they're both about a decibel more in terms of the peak. So there you go. It's not a game changer sticking the mains lead in. It makes a more difference, but it's not night and day. So yes, stick the mains lead in. People will still say in the comments, and I still see them say this thing. I stuck the mains lead in and I thought, wait, more bass. It's more bass heavy in with the mains. No, it's exactly the same frequency response, but it's going louder. You're hearing more bass, but you're hearing more of everything. It's not more bass heavy. It's the same as if you just stuck the volume thing straight up. Where are they made? They're made in China. We talked about the prices. Came out in 2019. Came out in 2022. I'm current and I'm loving it. Do you know why? You ain't got it in America. Do you know what that means? In Europe, we're beta testers. I bet when you get this speaker, there's no 700 hertz peak and it absolutely sounds fantastic. I can only tell you, us beta testers in Europe, this is what we got. Told you, they are giving you the wrong specs for the battery. That's appalling. And do you know what? You're going to pay $500 for this speaker. And do you know what codec you'll get? SBC. You're going to get a basic codec. Doesn't matter, absolutely. If you start trying to play high quality tracks down your Tidal or whatever, SBC is the most compressed of all the Bluetooth format. Yeah, the whole Bluetooth itself is compressed. Doesn't matter, of course. That's the limit on how much information you can get out of the track. Got Bluetooth 5.3 versus Bluetooth 5.1. They are both party boost, so they are compatible, but not in stereo. Both got auxiliary inputs. Both can be used as a power bank. Neither can be used to make phone calls. I was sitting there all night going, hello, Mark, can you hear me? No, she couldn't hear me. Do you know why? Can't use it as a phone speaker. We talked about the power ratings that they're trying to give you. I think the headline was 136 watts battery, 180 watts AC. No, it's not. They're actually claiming RMS. No, it's not 100 watts, 180 watts RMS. I'm going to get the comments in telling me the clue will be in the name, JBL something 300. No, they know what they're talking about. Anyway, we know it goes a little bit louder, and that's all down to the mids. Here's the thing, 6.7 kilos was 5.9 kilos. That's not insignificant. That's nearly a kilo heavier. For what? Oh, you put it's IP67. The 6 means it's dustproof, and the 7 IPX7 means 1 meter of water for 30 minutes. It floats, and it floats with the drivers up. That's brilliant. A lot of these heavy speakers now are floating with it, and because the smaller speakers normally don't even float. Floats and drivers up. No, it doesn't float with drivers up. What am I talking about? I wish I was a proper reviewer. It floats, but with the drivers down. When I'm reading my notes, and that's the same for both of them. They're claiming 40 hertz to 20 kilohertz frequency response, 50 hertz to 20 hertz. So they're saying 10 hertz of improvement. But here's the thing. What's the decibel range? You don't tell me the decibel range. Absolutely. And this is the thing. So industry standard would be plus or minus 3 decibels. Of course, you want to know what smoothing they're using as well. So again, marketing bullshit. I sound like someone else. And do you know what? I'm starting to realise why he says this stuff. It's marketing bullshit. I hope I don't get downranked for that. I don't get that many views as it is, but they downrank me for saying, well, let's double down. Bullshit. So we talked about the drivers. 107mm woofers, 2 20mm tweeters, and 2 passive radiators. But now we've got two 81mm woofers. Oh, they're so much smaller than the old Boombox 2. Two 20mm tweeters are the same size. But that massive, very, very fast race driver, 108, and it is quite big. It is big. It's like all of that. 189mm by 114mm. It's like the oval shape. And then we've got two passive radiators. We've got my masters, that's a big increase in surface area. And so it should have sounded, if it was 180 watts, it should sound massively louder, but it doesn't. I measured the auxiliary input. My accuracy is plus or minus 17 milliseconds. If you're a DJ, this is quite serious for you. I measured 0 latency in my testing. So 33 milliseconds on the Boombox 2. That's really good. So that's the difference between, you know, you're going, you can't have any latency at all. I found that was 0 within plus or minus. But sometimes these things don't transfer when you're on a different platform. Oh, that's the other thing I should mention. All my testing is done on Android SBC only, according to my Bluetooth scanner. I don't have Android. I don't have iOS. I have no intention of buying into that closed rip-off system. And I can't tell you, but I'm telling you on Android, it's 0 latency. Maybe different on iOS. Of course, it could be on something that's not even one of those two. I'm not going to tell you what I tested on. 33 milliseconds for DJing is maybe just about acceptable. YouTube, 140 milliseconds. That's rubbish. 116 milliseconds. That's all. So 80 milliseconds is my cutoff point when any lip sync issues becomes annoying. Oh, that's really, really poor. Bluetooth 5.3. Yeah, well, that ain't good either. Obviously, both JBL got a 3-band equalizer. So I've watched this video. It took me an hour and a half waiting for him to talk about his EQ, and he didn't even give us an EQ. Do you know why? That's for another video. The clue is on, off, and this is as far as I got. So yeah, it's got a 3-band. Let's get this straight. I haven't measured it yet, but on every other speaker I've measured from JBL, it's not a graphic equalizer at all, even with the 3 bands. It's an algorithm-driven balancer. You know, it does different things at different volumes. And it hits a limit, say on the bass, and you've pushed the bass, so it will reduce mids and highs and stuff to make it sound more bass heavy. And yet you could have just not had the app on and gone down to low volume because it would be exactly the same. So it's appalling. I know I call myself Alan Ross Reviews, but you know what? I still don't consider myself a reviewer. I'm just a bloke giving an opinion. It's all about opinions. Don't let anybody tell you there's one way to listen. That's what, even when you go on a lot of these high-end forums, they're knocking audiophiles. So because audiophiles these days, not audiophiles, the people who decided they'd like to call themselves an audiophile and don't know what an audiophile is. They've heard a couple of channels, maybe just one channel, where they believe an audiophile is someone who likes that speaker with that kind of sound, and anything else means you're deaf. No. Why are you still going on about it? Do you know why? Too much misinformation. Too many people now using YouTube as though that's, you know, the ultimate. Do you know what? You really want to know about audio? Go on the research papers. People actually do proper research and peer-reviewed papers on audio. You really, really want to know what the lowdown is. And an objective opinion. I know I'm a YouTuber and I love YouTube. I love being a YouTuber. But YouTube is not the bottom line for audio. People, even for me, I'm not claiming to be, a Sean Olive or someone like that. Someone who's a doctor, Sean Olive. Someone who's really done proper research. Even though I've got my opinion on Sean Olive, who's employed by Harman. My point is, let's get real. YouTube is what's led to people believing the Earth is flat. Got to know what's objective. Why am I even saying all this? You've switched off. I've probably lost it. Some of the videos are going minus 20 subscribers and stuff. It's brilliant, isn't it? It's a good thing. I don't really give a thing. So that's the end of the video. I'm just checking just on my vocals, on my waffling. I'm currently on 53 minutes. Even for me, that's over the top. I don't know how much I'd cut out in the edit, if anything. Maybe I'll just, I don't know. Listen, I'm enjoying it. I've told you about the Boombox 3. You want to know about the Boombox 3. You may agree or disagree. That's fine. This is my opinion. That's what I personally found. If there's a flaw in the way I tested the crossover, you tell me. I don't know. But that's what I found. 53, 54 minutes. I better say goodbye. Thank you for watching. I hope I see you in another video. I hope I gain some subscribers.
I ain't about that life. I ain't about that life. Ain't no project wife, got my logic right, cause I'm not your type. I ain't about that life. I ain't about that life. Sorry, ma, I ain't get it right. I'ma just live my life. I ain't about that. I ain't about that life.